Welcome to Let's Talk Property, an informal podcast show all about the UK property and mortgage market. I'm Nizam, and joining me is my co-host Lee. Whether you're a seasoned property investor or just starting to think about buying your first home, this podcast is for you. We'll be discussing a range of topics, including the latest market trends, tips for finding the perfect property, and how to secure the best mortgage deal. So join us as we explore the world of property and help you make informed decisions about your next property purchase. Today's topic, Lee, do you want to introduce it?
Yeah, so it is 10 questions all buyers should ask or must ask their estate agents when they're on the property hunt. So this is probably aimed at first-time buyers and people looking to move home, and really aimed at helping people gather the right information to help them make a decision as to whether they want to put an offer in, whether it's the right property for them, because buying a home is stressful. There's so much things to think about, mortgage, everything else. The exciting part, in most occasions is searching for that property, but actually what questions do you need to be asking? So I think we see a lot of first-time buyers in particular, they don't know where to start, so I think this podcast will hopefully help them gather sort of 10 questions that will hopefully help you make a decision and get that key information that you need about the property.
Love it. Because it's notoriously really quite easy, isn't it, buying property in the UK? So but no, I think having that idea of what kind of questions to ask an estate agent is going to be really helpful, because you do, as a first-time buyer, having talked to a lot of people and actually, when we actually were buying our first home, me and my wife, she had no idea what to ask, what questions to ask, and fortunately, because I was in the industry, I kind of had an idea on what I should be asking. But you often, if you don't have family or people experienced around you to support you and guide you, or lucky enough to have a good advisor, a mortgage advisor or broker that can guide you and help you, then you are left thinking, should I have asked more questions, or have I missed something? Or so it'd be really interesting. I'm interested to see what these 10 questions are.
Yeah, I think unless you've gone through the process, you're going, oh, I wish I asked that last time. So it's kind of hopefully giving you that sort of experience up front. So yeah, I'll dive straight in, shall we? Just to add, I'll probably go on the last two questions are kind of probably the most important. So I'll kind of throw them in towards the end. But we'll do them in priority order. They're all important, but we'll do them in some sort of priority order. So the first question you want to ask estate agents, particularly those when you're viewing, is you want to ask if the property or the people selling the property are part of a chain. So a chain is effectively where the seller of a property is relying on selling their home to buy another one. That then forms, a chain, because they're relying on the money in their own home to then buy a new property. This chain can be 1-2 properties, or it can be 15 properties. It can be really long, maybe not quite as long as that, but this is really important to understand, because it will help you understand potentially how long the purchase might take. If it's sort of 5 or 6 properties, it might take a bit longer than a month or two, because you're relying on so many parties to sell their property. So I think it's really important to understand, particularly when you're getting a mortgage as well. It's really important to understand how many people are in the chain, and if it is part of a chain. So I think that would be my number one. I think sadly, the longer the chain is, the greater chance of something going wrong. So the shorter the chain, the better it is, effectively. If it's just one property and the person selling the property doesn't need to buy anything else, or doesn't need to, doesn't buy any other property, then and it's just one property, you're in for, as a result, really. That's kind of best case scenario. So first question would be, are the sellers part of a chain? The second one is, have the sellers, or they call them vendors, but have the sellers had any major work done to the property? So that's kind of a key part, really, to understand what work's been done, is it in good condition? Because when you're going to view properties, you might not actually see what work's been done, because you're seeing it for the first time. You might have seen it in pictures, and that's all that's all you know. Have they had any recent work done to the property? Have they had a new kitchen put in? Have they had an extension? I guess, is it been done to regulations? Is there planning permission? If so, if there's been an extension, in most cases you'll need some sort of planning permission if there's been a sort of a sizable extension. So really important you kind of understand what work's been done. Obviously, it's nice to know whether there's been a new kitchen or whether there's been a new extension, but also more from a legal perspective as well. You don't want to be coming across any issues further down the line. So it'd be good to understand what work's been done, and also if they've got the relevant planning permissions in place. And it can be, believe it or not, something as simple as new windows can need planning permission. It depends on colour, depends on the property type, particularly if it's an older property as well. So understanding if the vendors or sellers have done any work to the property will be another one. This one is a cheeky one, and I love this one. How did you ask the agents, how did you reach the valuation figure for the property? So, I like this one because it makes the agent, they probably hate me for saying this, but it makes the agent work for their money a little bit, because hopefully they will have some comparables maybe on the street or, in the area, or they might have some statistics near a school, near the town, in a city centre. They might have some statistics, but it's always good to ask, how did you come to this valuation? Is it because you've seen is there other properties for sale in that area? I think it's really good to understand, what statistics back up the decision, because it could be that the sellers just told them they want to put it up for that much. And sometimes, sadly, some agents, they'll probably hate me say this, will probably just take instruction, although they might advise them, but actually they just take instruction from the seller and say, no, some sellers are quite strong and say, no, I want to sell this property for 500,000. But the agent might say, actually, we only think it's worth 480, for example. I'm just using an example. So
yeah,
really,
that happens, doesn't it, in the real world?
Absolutely. So I think it's good to understand how they've come to the valuation figure. Another question is, what's included in the sale? Now, I think so many people get caught out by this until they get to the solicitor work, until they've had an offer accepted, until they're going through the solicitor legal work, and they get this long bit of paper as to what's included in the property. And they didn't realise it didn't include light fittings, the blinds, the shed. Really dig deep as to what is actually included, because I know it sounds silly. Yes, you get the 4 walls, you get the windows and the door, generally speaking, but actually it's not a given that you'd get what's in the house. The sellers will itemize what they're willing to sell to you, and that could be part of the purchase price, or they might require you to pay more for anything else. So really understand what is included in the sale of the property. So if it's got an annex or a shed at the bottom, if it's got light fittings, if it's got blinds, because these things really do add up. And so many people get caught out when they start going through the legal process. Oh, I didn't realize the property didn't have the light fittings, or wasn't going to come with the shed, or so it's really important to understand what is included in the sale, and that will help you make your offer, determine what offer you're going to put in as well. Because if it doesn't include the shed, well, that might change things for you.
Just a really good example on that one actually is log burner, which you would expect to be included in a house because it's bolted in and it's fitted. Yeah, but it's not. It's a fixture or a fitting, so it can be taken. Some people will take it with them, if it's an expensive one, and they aren't cheap. So, if you are buying it, that can, like you said, it can add quite a bit to the cost. So that's a really, I found that out when we moved actually.
Yeah. And also it could work on the other side. They might be throwing loads in that you don't know about. There might be a sofa, there might be blinds, there might be all these light fittings and fixtures that you didn't even know about. You think, great, this is actually, I'm going to put an offer on this because it comes with so many things I didn't know about. It comes with the annex at the bottom. So really good to understand what is included in the sale when you're purchasing. Next question is, how much does the property cost to run? So this is probably really, laser focused, particularly if you're a first time buyer and you've never sort of paid the usual sort of outgoings for a property, or, you've not had council tax or bills and things before. So understanding the electricity and gas bills, what it is on average, because the agents should have these statistics. They should have, the rough figures for you in terms of what it's going to cost. And if more specifically, if it's a leasehold property, it has annual rent and ground service, annual service charge and ground rent. Get that right. So these are extra costs that would probably be, typically on a flat or an apartment that you'd find those. But these are the costs you need to understand, because they can really vary. So understanding how much it costs as an estimate for running the property, because you don't want any nasty surprises, because these are the sort of things you find out again when you get in the legal work with buying a property. The next question, are there any neighbouring properties that are rented or owner occupied? Now, this can be a good, and I guess this is probably more specifically in sort of the big cities, Cambridge, London. You don't want to be living next door to an Airbnb, in my opinion. That's probably a personal preference. But if you've got different people coming in and out of the property from time to time, or it's a short rented property, that might kind of guide your decision as to whether you want the property or not. So, you could be, in theory, living in a house next door to a property that's rented to 8 students, and it's got 8 different dorms in it. And you might not know that unless you ask the agent. So understanding, they may or may not be able to tell you, but understanding, what your neighbours are, who your neighbours are, is it sort of Airbnb, rented accommodation, or, are they owner occupied generally? Because that could, again, then help you make your decision moving forward. One thing that I do pick up on that is parking. When you want to say, if you've got 8 people living next door and you're on a roadside, how are you going to get a car parking space? So parking's probably a big one, looking at that one.
Isn't that like the number one reason for neighbour disputes as well, isn't it? I think parking.
Is it? I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine.
Which is understandable.
Particularly roadside, because there's no, you just have to have a permit, don't you, on the busy ones? But anyone parks anywhere. It's not sort of specific spaces for people. So generally anyway, but yeah, parking again, but just checking the properties next door and things, just checking if they're owner occupied or rented. That makes you helps you with the decision. Again, another one, a really important one. Are there any plans that could affect property prices? So are there any plans to build? It could be to build near your area or build property. It could be to build a cinema. It could be something, it could be anything, but understanding if there are any plans when buying a property. And this could be in any area. I think, I personally bought new build, and obviously the plans are to extend the street, but we want to know about whether there's new plans to build new developments, and is there a new shopping centre, and more specific on that. So that can then influence your decision on whether it's the right property for you. You might not want to live next to a shopping centre or a swimming pool or a cinema. So understanding what the plans are for the area and the property itself, or around the property itself.
And that gets picked up in legal searches, doesn't it? Is any plans, planning permissions, things like that in the local area on things like that, and new roads and new developments. But like you said, asking that question at this point is going to save you a lot of time and money, as opposed to getting to that point of weeks and weeks, possibly months down the line, and getting that solicitor paperwork, and they go, "Oh, did you know there was a road being built?" Oh no, I didn't actually. I'm going to pull out. And you already you like you said, you're already months in and money, quite a bit of money spent. So that's a really good question about that.
Yeah. Last 3 then, we've got the final 3. So this one is, how long have the current owners lived in the property? So an unusual one, but also it kind of gets you to understand, have they only been in the property for 6 months, a year? Why might that be? Is it, is there something particularly wrong, or is it, maybe, it could be a particular reason. But if it's for a short space of time, you might want to understand why that might be. So I think digging deeper on that, but don't be afraid to ask that question, how long have the current owners lived in the property? Because there might be problems that you discover that you might need to investigate. It could be anything. Could be that nasty neighbour.
And you never know where they are. I know when we bought our first house, talking about that again, that is a question we did ask, actually, just more out of curiosity. And they'd lived there something like 11 years. And the amount of confidence it gave us to kind of go, oh, actually, we don't need to worry about neighbours, or we don't need to worry about this or the other, because they've lived there 11 years. Must be all right. And it's funny, it gives you a lot of confidence knowing that they've lived there for that long, that actually you can put a bit more faith in it to go, it must be a good place to live then.
I think it would, wouldn't it? It would give you confidence. On the flip side, if someone's lived there for a short period of time, doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with the property. It might just be, doesn't it? But it might just be that. Might just be the situation. Final two. These are probably the most important ones, I would say, and it really will help you establish, more about negotiation, about the property itself. So the final two. So this one is, how long has the property been up for sale, and are there any offers in the table? That's quite direct, but at the same time, it's going to help you understand the interest in the property. It might help you gather in terms of what sort of bid or offer you might want to put in. If there's not been any offers in the property or on the property, you might not want to go for the asking price. Every area is different and every property is different, just to be clear. But it will, if you don't ask that question, you won't know. It's quite direct, but you won't know, the interest in the property, and ultimately the agent should be transparent with this in terms of, what interest they've had and whether there are any other offers on the table. They might not be able to disclose the offers. I don't know the full sort of detail on that, but it will at least help you understand the interest in the property, and particularly if it's been up for a few months. And you're the only one who's put an offer in or thinking of putting an offer in, then that might tell you something. It might tell you something in terms of whether it could be overpriced. It could be could be many reasons, but at least it'll give you an idea as to what interest you've had. The final and the big one, which again will help you with negotiating the property, is, why is the vendor or the seller, why is the vendor or seller selling the property? Why are they selling the property is probably the number one question to ask, because it will help you understand how quickly they might want to move. It could be that they're going through a separation. They could be keen because they need another catchment area in a school. It could be actually, there could be many different reasons. But if you understand why they're moving, it could help you understand how quickly they want to move, which then again could then help you understand there might be some movement on the price. If someone wants to move quickly, then they're probably more willing to accept a lower offer, generally speaking. So I think really understanding the circumstances of the seller, I think as a whole, is really key. To helping you determine how to negotiate, what offer to put in, but also it will help you understand what alarm bells might come up. It might not be the right property for you if they're selling quickly because of another reason. I don't know what that might be, but it could be work or something. But it's just understanding that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because at the end of the day, it is a negotiation. If you're buying a house and you're selling a house, it's a negotiation that takes place. And the number one rule, I think, or one of the top rules in negotiating is getting as much information as you can from the other person. So if you are asking that question, where they are, what their position is, and what's important to them. You can then understand what you've got that they're looking for, and you can then negotiate that as well, can't you? So if it is speed and you're in a position where you can move quickly, or timescales, actually they might want more time, and actually you might be in a position where you can say, take your time. And that, like you said, that might be more important for them to hear that from a buyer than, I'll pay you more than the other person. Money's not always the number one clincher, is it? Sometimes it's something else, and if you don't ask that question, you're not going to know the answer to that.
Yeah, and just to add to these 10 questions, it takes, particularly for first-time buyers, you've never been through this process, it takes confidence. It takes, it's a big ask to go into an estate agent, which you've never been before. You're going to view properties and you're speaking to an agent who you might have not even spoken to before, and you've got to ask these questions. Let's not forget, this is the biggest commitment and probably most costliest sort of object, as it were, you would buy in your life. It's probably the biggest commitment you'll ever have. So really important you try and get this information, because the last thing you want is to be completed, you've got the keys and you're discovering these problems and you just wish you asked these questions. So the reason why we probably put these questions out is really just to make sure you are you're getting the details you need, helping you make that decision. But it takes a lot, but it will be worth it in the long run. But also, don't be afraid to ask and feel like you're pushing. Asking these questions can actually make you a good buyer, believe it or not. Someone's really interested, someone's really keen, someone knows what they're talking about, someone's asking the key details. That might actually come across to the seller as well through the agent, and that can actually put you across as a good buyer. If you're asking the questions, and you're keen and you're asking the right questions and want to find out this information, that can filter down to the seller as well, selling the property. They're asking, don't think of it as a bad thing, think of it as a good thing when asking these questions. So that would be my tip for asking them. But yeah, hopefully that has helped. Yeah,
that's brilliant. And I think that you've done well there to cover them all in 20 minutes. When you said 10 questions, I thought, let's have a look. I'll keep you on the time on this one. No, but you did well. And I think, anyone, like you said, anyone that's in that position where they are feeling like they want to buy a property, but they're not 100% sure, they haven't got the guidance behind them, or they haven't got someone there to lean on, even just this episode alone is going to give them a fair bit of information to be able to feel a little bit more confident going to start to view properties and knowing that they've got an idea on what questions to ask and why. So I think that was fantastic. Yeah, hopefully a lot of value there for a lot of people.
Brilliant, fantastic. Before my voice goes, I am going to finish up. Cool. So
take it away.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Property. We hope you found the discussion on the UK property market informative and helpful. If you have any questions or topics and you'd like us to cover in future episodes, feel free to send us a message. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and follow us on social media. Updates on future episodes. Until next time, we'll see you in the property market.
You had to stumble. You've never done that.